Hi, second graders. Today's story is from Knowledge 3, Lesson 4, called the Olympic Games. Before we begin our read aloud, I'm going to go over our vocabulary words. Our first vocabulary word for today's story is the word compete. Say compete. Compete means to try hard to outdo others in a task, race, or other contest. Our next vocabulary word is the word determination. Say determination. Determination is a firm decision to accomplish something. Our last vocabulary word is the word grand. Say grand. Grand means something that's impressive or amazing. The travelers came from all directions, from every part of Greece and from every Greek city-state. Some even came from such distant places as Egypt and Spain. Many traveled on ships. Some rode on horseback or in horse-drawn chariots. Many hardy souls walked the whole way, determined to reach their distant goal, for they believed they were on a holy journey. Rich and poor, carried in luxury and treading on foot, they came by the thousands to take part to watch the Olympic Games. The Olympic Games were held every 4 years at the site of Olympia and included contests in which ancient Greek athletes would compete. Because these games were part of a religious festival or celebration to honor the king of the god Zeus, they were considered sacred. In the first Olympic Games, there were only foot races or running races. Later came events like wrestling, boxing, racing horses and chariots, throwing the heavy stone discus, and throwing the javelin, a type of long spear. Among the travelers to the games one year were two men, Myron and Pindar. They made their way to the sacred site of Olympia in a private carriage drawn by a team of horses, and they were driven by a servant. The passenger in the brown cloak, Myron, was so muscular that other travelers wondered, is he one of the Olympic athletes? But Myron was not an athlete. He was a sculptor. He used his muscular arms and huge hands to carve statues out of bronze and marble. Myron was telling his traveling companion, "Of course you are right, Pindar. I could just invite the champions or winners to my home after the competition and carve statues of them there. But I want my statues to show the exact moment when a runner starts to pull ahead in a race, or in the instant when a discus thrower is about to let go of that heavy stone and fling it down the field. So I prefer to see those Olympic Games with my own eyes." His friend Pindar smiled and answered, "I, on the other hand, have written poems in honor of champions without ever having seen them compete. But I am less interested in watching a runner cross the finish line in first place than I am in the effort and determination it took for them to get there. It is this I admire, and it is about this that I will write." Myron grinned. "Well, your way works for you, and my way works for me." Suddenly a voice called out, "Pindar, what are you doing with that Athenian? Don't you know the Thebans are still fighting a war against Athens?" Turning, Pindar recognized a friend from his hometown of Thebes. Directing his carriage driver to stop the horses, Pindar said, "My friend, you know that all such conflicts or fights are set aside here. Everyone is guaranteed or promised a safe passage going to and returning from the Olympic Games. In this way, all may gather to take part in this grand competition to honor Zeus and the other gods." The Olympic Games were more important than the conflicts the city-states were having with each other, and these conflicts were put on hold so everyone could gather safely for these sacred games. Pindar went on, "Besides, Myron and I are artists. When I write a poem or when Myron carves a statue, our interest goes far beyond the boundaries of any one city. We honor these champions as examples, so we might encourage all Greeks to do the best they can in their own lives. This is how we honor the gods, who gave us our hearts, minds, and muscles." By the time Pindar and Myron reached Olympia, the greatest athletes in the Greek world have already gathered. Pindar and Myron looked around exactly at the running track, the long jump pit, and the vast or very large horse racing stadium. In the distance, thick clouds hid the peaks of Mount Olympus. All of the athletes were men, for there were no events for women in the original Olympic Games, with the exception of the horses and chariot races. If women owned horses, they were allowed to enter them in the races, but they were not the ones who could ride the horses or drive the chariots. Women were not even allowed to be present at the Olympic Games to see their horses win. Victory, or winning, was a source of great pride for winners in their home cities. An Olympic champion received a wreath of laurel leaves to wear atop his head. But more than that, he knew his name would live forever as a hero in his city's history. In fact, many city-states awarded large sums of money to their champions. In some regards, things have not changed much in the 27th century since the first Olympics. Modern athletes, too, may win fame even if their greatest reason is to compete is for the love of the sport. The Summer Olympics are still held every 4 years, but now there are also Winter Olympics, with winter sports such as skiing, bobsledding, and figure skating that are held every 2 years after the Summer Olympics. The location of the Olympic Games also changes each time. They have been hosted in cities such as Seoul, Korea, Atlanta, Georgia, and Athens. Men and now women from all over the world travel to the chosen city to compete. Even if their countries are not getting along, people usually set aside their conflicts, just as in the ancient days, to honor the games. Even though many centuries have passed since Myron and Pindar traveled to the Olympics, they too are still remembered today. Myron's depictions of the Olympic champion, the discus thrower, remains one of the most famous statues in the world. The original statue was lost long ago, perhaps in a war or an earthquake. But fortunately, someone had made an exact copy, so we can still admire Myron's work. As for the poet Pindar, the Greeks loved his poems so much that for centuries after his death, he was remembered by the priests and priestesses at Apollo's temple. They would pray at closing each night, "Let Pindar the poet attend the supper of the gods." Later still, when the Greek king Alexander the Great ordered that Pindar's home city of Thebes be destroyed in a war, Alexander commanded to his soldiers, "Keep Pindar's house safe from the flames." Pindar's ideas about doing our best with whatever talents we are given and about getting along peacefully with one another remain part of our thinking today. In fact, we still call this way of seeing things the Olympic spirit.